Welcome to Inlet Protection, guidance for installation and maintenance brought to you by the Town of Bluffton's Watershed Management Division. For a complete list of the various best management practices, otherwise known as BMPs, that may be used for inlet protection, please reference the SCDOT's Qualified Products List number 58. This type of sediment tube is made with hay, as you can tell from the amount of shedding, and is not an allowable material for inlet protection in the state of South Carolina because, for one, you're going to have a ton of hay then floating around, and two, they deteriorate so quick as soon as they get wet, so they do not serve a viable purpose. Instead, if you're going to use a fiber sediment tube, coconut fiber, core fiber, and curled excelsior wood are preferable for use in the town of Bluffton because they allow for water to filter through the sediment tube themselves, meaning that they do not necessarily need to be installed to allow for an overflow in the event of a rainfall. They are good as is. The biggest thing with them is that because they effectively filter water, they become clogged with sediment pretty quick, so we recommend providing an overflow to prevent flooding issues just in case. These sediment tubes, which have the recycled rubber tire in them, can be used for inlet protection. However, the rate at which they filter water through them is significantly slower than other products, so we want to make sure that they are installed with an overflow during rain events, meaning that the center of the tube needs to be compressed down by removing material, which will be demonstrated shortly, to allow water to stage up just enough to flow over into the inlet. If the sediment tube is left as is, you're going to have a significant amount of roadway flooding. Inlet protection must be installed in a manner that does not block the entire inlet opening and allows for stormwater to enter the inlet during rain events. This method demonstrates the ability to modify a prefabricated tube to create a depression in the center of the tube to allow for an overflow while still providing a ponding area for sediment. Now that we've removed a good bit of the innards from the sediment tube using the ties on the end of the tube, you can see that all you really need are a couple inches of material in the center so that water will only need to stage up to about here to flow over into the inlet versus staging at the entire roadway to be able to go in the inlet. Now you have some options, nothing is required, but you have some options to keep the sediment tube from getting sucked into the inlet when there's heavy flows. You can put a cinder block of wood, or a similar option behind the sediment tube and in front of the inlet to keep it from getting sucked in, but again, it's not required and only an option. Keep in mind that if you do put a block here, just picture one, now the water will need to stage up even higher to be able to go into the inlet. Here's a before and after installing a sediment tube to allow for overflow during rain events. In the before image, the inlet opening is entirely blocked, which is going to cause the roadway to flood. And in the after image, we've got just enough of an opening for water to be able to flow over and sediment to be trapped in front of the sediment tube. Here's an example of a cinder block being used to allow for an overflow during rain events. You just need to keep in mind that should you choose to utilize this method, that the sediment tube is basically being pushed out further towards the road, meaning that water will need to stage up even higher to be able to go over and into the inlet. So you may need to remove even more material from the tube to make this happen, or implement an alternative installation method. Another method of installation of a sediment tube to prevent roadway flooding is the use of a J-hook formation. This allows one end of the inlet to remain open. This works when one side of the inlet upstream is an active construction area and the other side is stabilized. Using this method, flow can pool in the hook part of this formation, sediment can settle out, and water can flow around the tube and into the inlet. So as you can see, the entire inlet on the stabilized side remains open, so you're not going to have any roadway flooding, and now everything that's coming from an active construction site is going to be able to pool here and then flow around the tube and into the inlet. This is just one option for how you can install inlet protection around a combination curb grate inlet if you've got one side of the inlet active area and the other side stabilized. This formation utilizing double J-hooks works here specifically because it's on-street parking. You don't have to worry about vehicles driving over it all day long and busting open the tubes. So it's not exactly ideal for everywhere, but this is just an example of what you can do. Another option for installation of inlet protection at a curb grate inlet combo is to utilize a sediment tube as your curb inlet protection, just like it is, and then to install grate inlet protection, whether it's a rigid inlet filter like a silt sack insert, or an above grate option such as coconut fiber matting, donut hole, or any other approved BMP, to utilize 2 BMPs for one inlet. Here we have a rollover grate inlet with a rigid inlet filter insert under each grate inlet, which allow for sediment-laden water to flow into the bag, sediment settles out, and water stages up and flows directly into the inlet via prefabricated overflow holes in the insert. These are our recommended option for grate inlet protection as they do not get run over by vehicles, they have great sediment holding capacity, and they can be used over and over again. A piece of filter fabric underneath or over top the grate is not an approved type of inlet protection. Filter fabric, such as cloth or silt fence, is not designed to be used in areas of concentrated flows, such as grate inlets. Utilizing filter fabric underneath the grate leads to roadway flooding and results in dumping of sediment into the inlet when fabric is removed. Here we've got a good example of a sediment tube in need of replacement, as the tube is torn with innards coming out of it, and you can actually tell by the coloration of the tube that this tube has become clogged with sediment, therefore is not allowing water to filter through the tube at the rate at which it was designed. This tube likely causes roadway flooding during rain events, and tubes in this state are often the ones we see pulled. So anytime you've got a situation where your sediment tube looks like this, you need to replace it. Outside of this sediment tube, not being installed with enough of a depression in the center of the tube to allow for adequate overflow into the inlet, sediment must also be removed once it's reached 1/3 the height of the inlet protection. Removal of this sediment allows the BMP to maintain its ponding capacity for sediment. Thanks for watching. For additional information or to schedule a site visit, please contact the Town of Bluffton's Watershed Management Division at 843-706-4581 or amoreno@townofbluffton.com.